100 years ago, the young Turk government of the Ottoman Empire decided to deport and eventually massacre somewhere between 600,000 and 1 million plus Armenians. I'm Ron Suni. I'm a professor at the University of Michigan. I'm a historian, an author, and I'm Armenian. By the end of World War I, 90% of the Armenians of the Ottoman Empire are gone, either massacred, deported, or fled. They lost their own historic homeland. They lost a whole civilization, let alone the physical destruction of ordinary people. This is considered the first major genocide of the 20th century. The Turkish government officially denies that this was a genocide. They have argued in different ways. It didn't happen. It was a civil war. The Armenians were rebels. All we wanted to do was deport them. We didn't massacre them. They refused to use the word genocide. And that goes on today. Now, the last couple of years, the Turkish government of President Erdogan have made small gestures. For instance, on April 23rd, 2014, Prime Minister Erdogan offered condolences to the Armenians for what happened. But for Armenians, if the Turks don't come out and actually talk openly about this, if they don't officially recognize it as a genocide, most Armenians think that's inadequate. My grandfather decided there's no future for Armenians here. We're leaving. His family, all of those who stayed in Yozgat, were killed in 1915. I'm Armenian, born in America, but raised culturally in a certain way. But I'm also a scholar, and my loyalty is largely to what I would call historical truth, trying to find out what happened and explain why it happened, even if they touch us personally or indeed destroyed some of our ancestors. About 15 years ago, I joined with some of my colleagues, and we brought literally Turks, Kurds, Armenians, and other scholars together to talk about these events. Two of my associates insisted indeed, that I write a book on these events. And I was very hesitant at first, but then eventually I thought, you know what? I've worked on this so long, I ought to do this. And so I set out and wrote this book. They can live in the desert, but nowhere else. It's a scholarly book, but it tells a story. It's indeed, I think, the first narrative which tries not only to tell what happened, but to explain why this thing happened. I would say the thrust of the book would be the young Turks and the people who carried out the genocide were not monsters. They did monstrous things, but sadly, they were all too human, and we can understand what they did as the dark side of human nature. I wasn't motivated particularly by sort of Armenian patriotism to write this, but my real motivation was, as a scholar and historian, to try to tell the story so that people of various nationalities, Armenians, Turks, Kurds, Americans, Germans, Lithuanians, could all understand what happened and come to conclusions about what is definitely, indisputably, a genocide.